Hey guys, welcome back to First and 10, the NFL football podcast here over on Clueless Gamers. We are back, guys. We're going to be doing a lot today. We're going to be recapping week 1 and week 2 as we missed last week, so I do apologize for that. A little bit of technical difficulties, but we are back. Don't you worry. And then stick around at the end. There'll be always timestamps in the description down below. We're going to do week 3 predictions. Every single game. We're going to hold our feet to the fire here, Bri. And we're going to see if we're right. As always, as I just said, I am joined by my co-host here, Brian. Brian, thank you for joining me, man. How are you?
Doing well. Football's off to a good start. Really have enjoyed watching the first 2 weeks. I mentioned
Mm-hmm.
the first show. I was more looking forward to this season just because I thought things would be running more smoothly. And through the first 2 weeks, we have seen a lot of great games and great action. It really has just been good to watch.
Yeah, it's awesome. It's honestly awesome just seeing fans in the stands again and having a home field advantage atmosphere. I mean, remember last year, there had never been more road teams winning games ever in the entire history of the NFL, and that is obvious. You attribute that to the fans. You know, they play a gigantic part in being there and disrupting offensive line cadences and everything else. So it's just nice to feel like I know we're not there yet, but we're somewhat normal. We're starting to get there in a lot of these stadiums around the country. Brian, with that being said, week 1 and week 2 are picks before we jump into week 1. Man, in week 1, we had a rough go. All right, we both went 7-9 in our picks, and we'll get to our week 2 picks in a second. But I think we got to kick off here. One of the games I absolutely have to highlight. It's just there was a lot of fascinating games in week 1, but none more shocking for me than Packers Saints. I mean, they play this game in a neutral site in Jacksonville because of all the hurricane issues that were going on. Which I don't know if you saw this. Did you see that in poor New Orleans yesterday that the dome's roof was on fire? I mean, like
Yes.
they can't catch a break down there in New Orleans. It's insane, but we had this whole issue with the hurricane. They had to move it to a neutral site. It was up to the visiting team, the home team's kind of discretion. Sean Payton and the team ended up going with Jacksonville as the neutral site, as Jacksonville was in Houston that week, and it was just a natural choice. But it didn't help the Packers at all that they were away
Mhm.
from the New Orleans Dome. Playing in a neutral site, they got absolutely obliterated. Probably, I would say, without a doubt, the worst statistical game of Aaron Rodgers' career. I know it's a week 1, so it doesn't have the same importance as a playoff game, but statistics-wise, if you look up the QBR, if you look up the QB rating, his worst game as a starter as a pro, it was hard to watch, Brian, at times, and I was definitely and genuinely shocked when I walked away from that game and saw that the Packers scored a grand total of 3 points. I mean, what were your feelings on watching that game unfold in week 1?
Yeah, that was really a fascinating one. I mean, going in, if you were to say the Saints would win in a close game, I don't think that necessarily would have been shocking,
No.
even though the Packers were probably favored going in, but you certainly couldn't have seen 38-3 or whatever it
No.
wound up being. And if you look at the stats afterward and you were told that one quarterback would throw for 5 touchdowns and the other would throw for 0 and 2 interceptions, you probably would have said the no touchdown guy was Jameis Winston.
Yeah.
Well, he turns out to have thrown 5 touchdown passes. So a rollicking start for him in his first start of the season. While Rodgers, like you said, I mean, it easily was the worst game of his career. He's never a guy who turns the ball over. And so for him to have multiple interceptions and just look disinterested, after the game, hearing him in the post game just say, yeah, we played bad, I played bad, really gave you nothing. I mean, I think it was very important for the Packers to bounce back the way they did in week 2, albeit against a lonely opponent in Detroit. But that week 1, that certainly left a bad taste in your mouth for the Packers.
Yeah, I definitely think it was concerning. And, even despite, we'll talk a little bit about week 2 when they went against the Lions. To have 15 to 28, Rodgers goes through 133 yards, no touchdowns, 2 picks, And the picks were strange. I mean, that one
Mhm.
that I think of is where he kind of did that arm punt where he threw it like 50, 60 yards, and it was up to absolutely no one. And then the Saints end up actually not getting tackled where they make the interception. They run it like another 40 yards back, which set up another Jameis Winston touchdown. Like, there was some odd decisions. The entire offense for the Packers looked out of sync all day long. They couldn't get the running game going. They couldn't get the passing game going. I know they have some issues on the offensive line with Bakhtiari still out at left tackle, but they just didn't look well coached and well executing. And then, as you alluded to, the tension after the game in the press conference where he's not making a big deal about it. He's kind of putting the onus on himself, but also the rest of his teammates, when I wanted to be more like, bro, like, look at your own. Don't call out the rest of your team. Look at you. You were
Yeah.
terrible. And then for LaFleur to say that it was embarrassing, a reporter reads that quote back to Rodgers, and he goes, well, if he wants to say that, I don't agree with that. I wouldn't say that. It's just one game. Like, just the tension there was, at least
Yeah.
for me, I don't know how you felt, it was really uncomfortable watching.
Definitely was, and I think it really kind of all added up to what we heard all through the off season about what was going on with the relationship between Rodgers and the Packers organization. So it almost wasn't completely stunning that they start the first game of the year and it's on a neutral field and they just look disinterested after all the turmoil that had led up to that point. And the thing is, as we all know, the Packers are a very talented team, and we expect them to be one of, I don't know, if not the last four teams remaining, certainly a playoff team, certainly the favorite in their division. But they're going to have to figure some things out with this relationship with Rodgers in order for things to get right.
Yeah, and I think that was us on week one when we were filming our first episode, is maybe we should have took more into account that, listen, Rodgers was not there for any of the camps. He barely played. There was no time to get in sync with this offense. And I know they're returning a lot of the same pieces, but still, you need to work that out every single season to get up to speed, to get into quote-unquote football shape and get used to the speed of the game, no matter how many times you've been in the league. And I think that was clear, added on top of his very eventful offseason, his clear what, Brian Gutekunst, the GM and everything wanting him fired, and the Packers refused to, naturally, and all of that tension going on. Maybe we should have paid more attention to that, in the sense that, hey, they might come out really, really flat on a neutral site against the Saints. I guess that more speaks to us not having that much respect for the Saints going into week one, given that Drew Brees is retired. But I don't know what to make to the Saints. We'll get more to week two after that. But in week one, I would say they were certainly efficient, impressive, and they did their job.
Right. Well, I have to say I was feeling pretty good about my upset pick there to win that division, favoring
Yeah.
the Saints over the Bucks, which now looks a little bit silly after what we saw in week two. But look, I still think this is a talented team. I mean, they're going to be hard pressed to win the division. I would acknowledge that. I admit I was going a little outside the box there, maybe pulling out a little Skip Bayless, trying to be too bold. But the bottom line is, the Saints certainly looked good after that week, and then, as we know, laid an egg in a divisional matchup in Carolina this past Sunday.
Yeah, two marquee franchises that we got to keep an eye on, as always, going into the rest of the season. Brian, let's jump over to the Arizona and Titans game. This was one of your picks of a game to talk about, and another game that I said, and I rewatched it right before we started, of what we said. And I said, hey, I'm very impressed with the Cardinals' explosive offense, Kyler Murray, but I believe the Titans are going to show out in this one. Well, boy, was I wrong, Brian. I mean, the Titans, you want to talk about laying an egg. They were terrible. They couldn't protect Tannehill. They couldn't get the ball down the field. They couldn't defend Kyler Murray for a lick. I mean, they had nothing going at home and get absolutely blown out in week one. What was your takeaway watching that game?
Yeah, well, you address a lot of the offensive issues there, and then you look at the defensive side, and they're giving up big plays left and right. Arizona dumps 38 points on them. It's 2 touchdowns for DeAndre Hopkins, 2 for Christian Kirk. So Kyler Murray just had a field day in this game. But the thing with Tennessee is I don't think they can be at peak effectiveness if Derrick Henry gets shut down.
Yeah,
And case in point with this game, he never got into a rhythm early. They shut him down. They limited his big runs, had a very pedestrian day running the football. And as a result, the Tennessee offense cannot open itself up when when you shut him down like that. So I just think that's the key for any team going against them. You number one goal defensively is to limit the run game. Arizona did in that game, and couple that with a huge offensive performance. Kyler Murray is just electric. I mean, what we've seen from him through the first 2 weeks, and that's the recipe to beat Tennessee. So certainly an impressive start for the Cardinals.
Which I would say is like, not that we didn't see that coming, because that's not too surprising, right? You stop Derrick Henry, you stop this offense. I guess I just put a little bit more stock, I'm guilty once again, that, hey, they trade and they get Julio Jones. I thought that would open up the passing game a little bit more, that opposing defenses would respect it. And now with Tannehill with another weapon, that in turn opens up more of the running lanes for Derrick Henry. So I thought that balance would be more effective. I think maybe I underestimated and kind of overvalued this offensive line for the Tennessee Titans. It's kind of middle of the road. It's not great. We see that, Taylor Lewan, their tackle, he's hurt going forward for the season. He got hurt in the week after in week 2. They're banged up already. They're not fantastic on that offensive line. And ultimately, if you're a power running team first and then you play off the play action off of that with Ryan Tannehill, if you can't protect up front, no one's going to respect either side of the ball from running or passing. And I think that, for me, is the main issue, that maybe I overvalued the offensive line of the Tennessee Titans.
Yeah, and I think that makes sense, and certainly they do have theoretically better options in the passing game. I mean, Julio Jones, we expect to have big games. He had a very big game in Seattle, had a touchdown that inexplicably got overturned. You probably saw that because you were keying in on that game, but kind of a bizarre officiating decision. But nonetheless, that does add another dimension to their offense. And you and I both think they're going to win this division, and that's a division that's off to a dreadful start. I mean, if not for Tennessee rallying against Seattle, the only team with a win through the first 2 weeks would be, of everybody, Houston. So that really is bizarre the way it's playing out.
And their win isn't that impressive. It's over the Jags. It's over the lowly Jags. So it's like, that division's a joke. But we also can't get off this game, Brian, without not talking about Chandler Jones. I mean, this guy is a monster. We knew that going in. 5 sacks, Bri, in this game. 3 in the first quarter. I mean, Ryan Tannehill is going to see that man in his nightmares for the entire rest of the season. That was the mainstay of getting, 6 sacks in the game for the Cardinals, 5 of them being on Chandler Jones. I mean, what'd you make watching that?
Well, it's an incredible performance, and just goes to show that Bill Belichick, even once in a while, can make not the wisest of decisions, because he traded him, and the package they got back, I don't think was too great. And look, we've lauded the Patriots time and time again for great moves that they've made personnel-wise, but that is one that they're going to look back and say, that's a superstar that got away for not very much.
Yeah, you always know Bill is someone who tries to trade, people before they get to the point of kind of dropping off of the cliff or so. But yeah, I'm looking it up here. They traded Chandler Jones all the way back a few years ago for, it looks like, a second-round pick and an offensive guard. So I would say it didn't really work out too well for the Patriots, and it's working out pretty well for the Cardinals. Hopkins continues to be impressive. Christian Kirk, as you said, 2 touchdowns. The guy I'm also pointing out here, Rondale Moore. This guy here, this rookie out of Purdue, we saw what he did in the second week against Minnesota. He can fly, this kid. And you add him as another weapon on top of the 2 I mentioned, plus an A.J. Green, and you still have people like Chase Edmonds and James Conner coming out of the backfield, and Kyler just cooking it all up, running around. They're going to be a scary team to watch, even maybe more scary than we thought in the Arizona Cardinals. That division is just loaded.
It really is. I mean, Seattle, the only team that's lost through the first 2 games, and that was a game that, frankly, they should have won. So, yeah, the Arizona offense, we expect it to be explosive. There's a lot of dimensions to it. I like adding A.J. Green and Larry Fitzgerald. I don't know, what's the deal with him, if he's planning on coming back at some point or if he has officially retired. I'm not really sure what his future is, but they've got so many wide receivers at Kyler Murray's disposal, and they're going to put up points.
Yeah, he really hasn't made much news. As far as I know, he didn't come out and say that he was going to officially retire, but then, they're saying that he's kind of 50-50 on both sides of it. I think he did end up taking a snap this weekend? I don't know if he did. I don't think he did, right?
Not that I know of.
Yeah, so I think right now it's just kind of a waiting game to see what happens with him. Is he going to get signed by the Cardinals again or someone else? I guess that remains to be seen going forward. So we go over,
Yeah.
Brian, to one of the other games before we get to the Monday night game that we wanted to talk about. And this is Cleveland and Kansas City. And I'm sure you're going to wave the banner over there for Mahomes and talk about the greatness of the Chiefs. So I'm going to take the opposite point, and I'm going to talk about Cleveland.
Mm-hmm.
And, man, were they impressive, right? They got a whole bunch of injuries coming into this. You know, both sides we saw had COVID issues, had some injuries, especially Cleveland. You know, Odell still has not come back to start the season already. They had a couple injuries over on defense. And I want to champion the Browns, right? They're impressive. They won against one of the best teams in the entire league, and the Chiefs. They hung true. All true. All props. Here's my issue, Brian. When this team faces any little bit of offensive adversity, whenever they need a touchdown against a good team, a playoff team, a above 500 team, they can't seem to do it. And I'm not trying to be negative in the second, first, and 10 of the year. I'm really not. But what I watched there and that last, 10 minutes of the fourth quarter where Baker could just not get consistent first downs, even to blow the clock out, to run it out, never mind get any significant points on the board, that's concerning. That's concerning. I know that other guy over there is Mahomes, but hey, guess what? You're in the AFC. You're hoping to get an amazing, max contract with the Browns. Mahomes ain't going anywhere. Josh Allen ain't going anywhere. Lamar Jackson is not going anywhere. Derrick Henry and the Titans are not going anywhere. If you want to compete with these teams, you need to be one of the best. Justin Herbert and the Chargers aren't going anywhere. And I can trust all of those guys to make a play as we've seen this season. I don't know if I can trust Baker Mayfield to make that play when I need him to. Am I being too negative, Brian? I mean, what's your thoughts on that?
No, I mean, I think it's a good point. I still have my questions about Baker Mayfield as well. I know some people are of the opinion that he's a no doubt franchise quarterback. I'm not necessarily there yet. I think Cleveland's a more effective offense when they're running the football with Nick Chubb, and Mayfield's being set up off play action, and hopefully they can eventually get Odell Beckham back, and that's obviously a big weapon at wide receiver. But you look at that game back in week 1, and the other thing is they had a lead in this game. I turned it on. I had some things going on, and then turned it on. They were up 22-10, and I was like, oh wow, this could really be a statement for the Browns in week 1 on the road against big bad Kansas City. But then, as you mentioned, their offense went stagnant, and the Chiefs, turning it over to them, they just have the unique ability of just flipping the switch where they can make magic with their offense. Exactly. And you watch that 75-yard touchdown, the thing of beauty when Mahomes.
That's not even fair.
He hits Tyreek Hill. We saw more of those plays in the last Sunday night game against Baltimore. He can just do things that nobody can, and this offense can. Tyreek Hill is just an unbelievable weapon. We know about Travis Kelce. I'd like to see them find a way to get more consistency in the running game. Edwards-Helaire has been a little bit of a disappointment so far, but they've got very few weaknesses, and offensively, you can keep them down for a period, but for a full 60 minutes, they're just eventually going to make plays, and that's what makes them so dangerous.
Yeah, they're scary. You go outside in the passing game, outside of a Hill and Kelce, obviously, they're the marquee guys, right? But McCole Hartman, he could blow the top off of any defense. You want to get a nice first down and third down, DeMarcus Robinson's right there. Brian Pringle, he's another one. So there's weapons all over the place. I do want to see more consistency out of that running game, kind of a la when Clyde Edwards-Helaire played his first couple games in the NFL. I do want to see a little bit more of that balance and explosiveness. I will say I've been very impressed so far with the redone offensive line of the Chiefs. There are still some growing pains there. You could see it as they're getting the chemistry together, and we saw that more into week 2. But I think right now they definitely look miles above, even at this point in the season, above where that offensive line ended last year in the Super Bowl. And we know the Chiefs are going to be there at the end, right? They're probably going to be one of the last 4 in the AFC in the dance by the end of the year. I'd like to say the Browns are going to be there. I like to say with all this talent, especially as they get more healthy, they're going to be there. And then I look at Baker, and hey, if someone, it's the Derrick Henry thing. What if someone comes along, Brian, they shut down Chubb and Hunt for the day? We've seen that before. I haven't been able to rely on Baker to beat a consistently good team that he is playing and be able to go mano a mano and outduel another high-level quarterback. That's where the concern is. When you're leading the Chiefs in their building, opening up the season through 3 quarters, and then you can't finish it out, you can't even waste the clock down the stretch, you keep going 3 and out. Then Baker has that turnover at the end, which I understand he was trying to throw it out of bounds, and he kind of got shoestring tackled, and it came up short, and that ended the game pretty much with about 1 minute and 5 seconds left. But there's got to be – I want more out of him. If he wants the money that he's going to ask for, that he's going to demand, he's got to do more for me, Bri. He has to.
Yeah, that's certainly fair, and I think part of the key to getting him up to speed is he's got to eventually find a rapport with Odell Beckham. I mean, this is the team's #1 receiver. We know he's missed the first 2 games. I'm not sure if he's set for action this week or not, but he's going to be back at some point, and they've got to be able to use him the way he was once used as a Giant when he was one of the premier players at that position, and that would go a long way in helping Baker Mayfield and the entire offense.
And it's going to be big test here because Odell's status is up in the air, and remember, we know Jarvis Landry is probably going to miss the next month of the season now with that MCL injury that he has in his knee. So there's your second wide receiver
and that's a key loss.
That's a huge loss.
Yeah, that's a key loss.
Yeah, so that's big. Yeah. So it's going to be a lot of testing of really the metal that Baker Mayfield is made up of. We're going to find out in these next few weeks. Bri, the final game that I want to talk about here in week 1 is the insane, thrilling, wacky Monday night game between the Baltimore Ravens and the Las Vegas Raiders in the brand new stadium for the Raiders, which, yes, they opened last year, but this was the first time, much like the Rams and SoFi that week, that there was fans in the new stadium. It was an electrifying, crazy Raiders crowd, as you expect. We come in there. We both picked Baltimore. We wouldn't be surprised, we said, if the Raiders did pull it out because they play well in the beginning part of the season. Maybe we should have taken our own advice. But we figured even with all the injuries that the Ravens had, that Lamar would be able to find a way. Well, he got close, and he was really doing it all by himself in opening night. But Derek Carr put on a show. I mean, 435 yards, the walk-off touchdown, him doing it all by himself to some guys like Brian Edwards that we never heard of in our life. I mean, what was your takeaway when it was all said and done in overtime that the Raiders walk off and beat the Ravens?
Yeah, that was a fascinating game. I mean, the way it starts was, I think, how we more expected it to play out. The Ravens kind of going up and down the field, Lamar Jackson doing his thing, and the Ravens had the early lead, and you figure they're going to just go on to a road win. But the Raiders were just, like, not on their watch. And you mentioned, I mean, the big plays that Carr made in the passing game. I mean, Darren Waller has become an all-world player at the tight end position. He has just been an absolute beast. Oh, by the way, 19 targets, had just a huge game. And remember, he was a former Raven who was a pretty nondescript player at that time, but has just completely blossomed since going over to Oakland and now Las Vegas. But yeah, Carr made big plays. And remember, in this game, the Raiders thought they had it won initially, and the play was called back. They said no touchdown, and then Carr winds up hitting Zay Jones, the former Buffalo Bill, who didn't work out there, for the big touchdown. So yeah, that was just a huge win, and give Derek Carr a lot of credit, because I think a lot of people, including us at times, have kind of thrown cold water on him, and I think he's had to prove the doubters wrong, that he's a pretty good starting quarterback in this league, and who knows how far the Raiders can go. But it's a heck of a start when they get Baltimore and Pittsburgh to start the year, and they go 2-0, including a road win at Pittsburgh. So, fine start for John Gruden's team.
No, I'm definitely very impressed. I'm a little bit hesitant still because of the entire situation that they always collapse around Thanksgiving. It happens every single year under this John Gruden team. But I think Derek Carr is he's not out there just to prove wrong people like me and you, because, you know, we're nobodies here on the internet, right? He's outproven other large media voices. He's also trying to outprove and show up his coach. Remember, John Gruden did not give him a welcome reception since he has been there, since he had returned to Oakland and now Las Vegas. And I think he's out to show you that I'm the guy. Remember, they signed that huge contract going into last season that I believe we talked about on the show of Marcus Mariota. And he was trying to play him. He's in there when Carr's banged up. He actually had a big run in this game, and then he ended up getting injured, as Mariota always ends up getting injured, and now I think he's on the IR. But there was some competition there that I think Gruden was trying to lean more to Marcus maybe and have a reason to give him the reins. And Derek Carr, time and time again, has fought through adversity and proved everyone, including his coach, that I'm the guy, this is my freaking team, and no one's going to say otherwise. And it was impressive that, like you said, he throws that touchdown, or they thought was going to be a touchdown to Bryan Edwards. They go back, everyone's on the field. They got to get everybody off the field. They down it at the half-yard line. They run a play of a sneak, doesn't work. Then second down, they run a run, doesn't happen. A penalty on the rookie Alex Leatherwood out of Alabama, that backs him up. And as soon as that happens, I go, this is going to be a pick right here. I could just feel it. The next play happens, goes right through his hands, hits off a Ravens face mask. One of the defenders pops up in the air and a pick. And at that point, I don't know if you were feeling this way. I was like, the Ravens are going to win this game. This is classic Raiders. This is exactly what's going to happen. And somehow the Raiders defense held together, gets Lamar on the sack fumble. And then, as you said, they come back and hit that Zay Jones touchdown on the zero cover blitz that was going on. But I'm just overly impressed of what Derek Carr has done.
Yeah, and you make a good point, because I actually had forgotten, being that the game was now a good while ago, that the possession had actually changed, that the Raiders wound up turning the ball over after the touchdown came off the board. I had thought it was later, that possession, but that's a good call. Ravens actually ended up touching the ball, and the Raiders got it back and then scored. So yeah, there was just a lot of things going on in that game that made it wild, but the Raiders able to pull it off. Certainly impressive.
Absolutely, and I'll give my one final shout out to defensive coordinator Gus Bradley. He's for the Las Vegas Raiders. Once upon a time over there in Seattle. He's made a few stops around the league, the Falcons as well. And what he has done, and maybe, I'm not trying to overhype this like crazy. It's only 2 weeks. But what he has done with this, I thought, poor Raider defense going into the season, I think it's been nothing short of damn impressive between the Ravens, and then you come back against the Steelers, and they have a lot. I know Ben is not the same, but a lot of offensive weapons there. I think he deserves an absolute shout-out, because at the end of the day, I could trust Derek Carr right now. I have to be able to trust this defense if they want to play in January and, maybe February. But at least in January, I need that defense to come around for the Raiders there.
Yeah, and I think Gus Bradley's a guy who's better equipped as a coordinator, because we saw him as pretty much an overmatched head coach those years in Jacksonville.
Yes.
It just never worked out. So I think he's in a good spot now and getting the most out of that defense early in the season. Look, the Raiders are going to be an intriguing team to watch. That division is very interesting. We haven't touched on Denver yet, but they're off to a terrific start at 2-0. You got Vegas at 2-0. You have the Chiefs and Chargers. There doesn't look like there's a weak team in that division so far, so it's going to be interesting to see how it plays out.
Both West teams are both West divisions are insane right now. It's just crazy. Let's switch over to talk more about that stuff into week 2. But let's go to one of the weaker teams and weaker divisions in football in the NFC East. And let's go to that Thursday night game in week 2. Giants visiting the Washington football team. A crazy second week in a row, which is very rare. And as we talked about pre-show, we're probably not going to get a third good Thursday night football game in a row. Probably not. But 2 to start off the season. And in that second one, the Giants losing by 1 point on a mistake on a last-second field goal against the Washington football team. Daniel Jones gutting it out, giving his heart out. Taylor Heineke playing really well until he had that last pick. And that didn't even end it for the Washington football team. The Giants still couldn't close away the game. And in the end, it's the 17th overall pick from last year's draft or 2 years ago's draft in Dexter Lawrence out of Clemson. He steps off sides. They say he enters the neutral zone, which there was some debate online. Was he there or was he not there? Or was he just getting a good jump off the ball? But on the field, it was called as an offsides, and they get to re-kick it, the Washington football team. After the missed kick by Hopkins, they make the second one. I mean, just what a heartbreaker. The Giants dropped to 0-2 for the 5th year in a row. This team has dropped the first 2 games of the season. Brian, what's your takeaway on that Thursday night football game last week between these 2 teams?
Well, it's yet another bitter pill to swallow for the Giants, and what feels like have just been so many of them. You talk about a franchise that just looks like it has completely lost its way, really since the last Super Bowl win against New England. I know they had the one playoff appearance and they had the 11-win season under Ben McAdoo. Right. And that's really where things have gone completely off the rails. And I'm not blaming the outing on the boat for the reason, but that clearly, as we know at the time, was not a good look for a team that was in the playoffs, getting ready to play a playoff game in Green Bay, lost that game, and since then, this team has the worst record of any franchise in the NFL. I'm not sure people realize it, but that's the record since that very moment. So it just seems like nothing is going right. You have a game here Thursday night where Daniel Jones is playing really well. He's running all over the place. At one point, looked like he ran for an almost 60-yard touchdown that came off the board on a holding. That just seems to be the kind of things that set the Giants back, and they can't run the football, which is a real mystery to me. When you invest a second overall pick in Saquon Barkley, and I know the issues are probably more about the offensive line, and we know how that goes, but Barkley himself has not proven to be durable, hasn't proven he could handle a heavy workload. I'm just seeing a lot of problems with the Giants. I thought last year with Joe Judge, they started to take some steps forward. I liked some things that they were doing, but I got to say now I'm really worried about this team. It looks like they're headed for another lost season and just look like a franchise that is completely in search mode.
No, I completely agree. I thought we had some hope last year with Joe Judge, and then we had some of the reports in the offseason of how strict he was being. I mean, there's players retiring in the middle of camp. What the hell is going on over there? Is it them not wanting to work hard enough? Is it Joe Judge pushing the envelope a little bit too much? But coming from a special teams coach in New England, you would say that would be his specialty, right? And then to have a special team penalty, a lack of discipline on special teams, be the way that you lose a football game on a national stage. I mean, that's just unexcusable, Brian. It's inexcusable. Something like that cannot happen. He cannot jump off sides. You have to, whether you want to debate on the internet or not, all these, so-called Twitter bots and, online coaches, I'm not going to pretend to be any of that. But to me, you have to tell your guys right there, make sure, especially the guys in the middle, you do not jump off sides because we don't want to give these SOBs another chance at a kick in case he misses it. And that's exactly what happens. It's bad. And we highlighted that we were not high on this offensive line going into the season. They have proven to be pretty piss poor, which is not to be shocking. It's to be expected. I've been more, especially in this game, I think Daniel Jones played really solid. He throws for 249. He runs for 95, almost 100 yards. And I believe they had the touchdown call back on another one of his runs. That was a penalty. You had the shot over to Slayton that he drops. It's in both hands. Is it led a little bit long? Sure. Lay out for the ball, man. You got to catch that. You're wide open. There's no one within at least 10 yards of you. It's just missed opportunities that we're going to be able to put into a highlight reel at the end of the season and put some Benny Hill music in the background. And that's going to be the Giants season. I'm just, as we live locally to these New York teams, it's just sad watching them just be so dreadful year in and year out.
It really, I couldn't have said it better. It's one thing if both teams have a bad couple of years, but it feels like we're going on 5-6 years of this just inept football from both teams. It really is painful to watch. And you mentioned the mental mistakes and the drop there by Slayton on a ball that he could not have been more wide open. There was nobody within 15, 20 yards of
Insane.
him. I get the throw may not have been perfect, but still, that ball's got to be caught in the National Football League. And, you pay pretty good money for another wide receiver in Kenny Golladay. Where's he been? I mean, they're not even
Yeah,
targeting him
he's
through the
yelling.
first couple weeks.
It looks like he's yelling at Daniel Jones on the sideline, but then he came out and said he was yelling at offensive coordinator Jason Garrett, which is also not good. So there's
Yeah.
already strain going there and disgruntled players, new players on the team. It's just not a good look all around going into week 3. It really isn't.
No, it isn't. And frankly, they have a winnable game. Atlanta is no good team by any stretch. And
Yeah.
you've talked about how poor their defense is. We'll get to our picks in a little bit. It's a game the Giants can win. I'm kind of going back and forth on it. But does this look like a team that could even approach 500 from what you've seen so far? Not to me.
No, not to me. And I went back and you could correct me if I'm wrong down below. I'm pretty sure since that famous boat game, which was before obviously the playoff game against the Packers 2016 season, the Giants are 18-46, which I'm pretty sure is like the worst stretch of games in the NFL in that time. Like that's just for a marquee franchise. That's unacceptable for the Mara family. Like you can't have that happening, especially in that city where the Jets have been terrible, you could say, for 10 years. The Giants are coming up right around that. 10 years ago was their last Super Bowl win. They've had what, 2 good seasons, 1 good season since then. It's not enough. And then for a defense that I want to give praise into the Giants, you have Taylor Heineke stepping in there, really making his second start in the NFL besides that playoff game against the Bucs with now Fitzpatrick out for at least half the season with his hip issue, and he tears you up for 336 yards, and he throws a terrible pick where he doesn't see the defender in his own territory to end the game, and you still can't put the team away. I mean, just it's bad. It's just bad, and we could talk about that all day long, that game, but even not as a Giants fan, it just frustrated me watching them once again throw another game away. It's ridiculous. Brian, let's transition. Let's transition to something a little bit better. At least for one team. Maybe we'll talk about the other side of it. Let's go to this Vikings-Cardinals game, which was a high-flying, explosive shootout there in the desert in Arizona. And I'll take it to the Cardinals side. Another, at least offensively, impressive week from the Arizona Cardinals. They are proving that they are a force to be reckoned with, not only in the NFC West, but in the entire league. If they could keep up something like this and maybe cut down on some of those turnovers that Kyler Murray, sometimes he could do a little too much and he could throw some costly interceptions. So if he could cut down on that, throws for 400 yards in this game, rushes for another 31, has 4 total touchdowns, 3 in the air, 1 on the ground. He's spreading it out. And as I called out earlier, that guy, Rondale Moore, going crazy once again, the rookie there. They added in some guy, Max Williams. He's it's spelled with 2 X's. This guy is catching 94 yards. Kirk is there again. Hopkins, for him, had a relatively quiet game, but he gets in for a score. AJ Green gets in for a score. I mean, there's not enough, I think, you could say about how explosive this Arizona offense is. Is there?
There really isn't, and it's just amazing to think that Arizona was able to get DeAndre Hopkins for what they did. I mean, it cost David Johnson, the running back, and what I guess another draft pick. It just was a horrendous, just a real
round draft pick.
Yeah, a real head-scratching move by Houston, and a litany of them for that franchise, and that's why they are where they are. But hey, Arizona will take it because
Brian,
they got one of the best.
That's why Bill O'Brien's in Alabama right now.
Right. And Arizona will take it, getting one of the best players really in all the league, regardless of position, in Hopkins. I mean, that's how good he is. What a weapon for Kyler Murray, who through the first 2 games, you'd have to say is right up there with Patrick Mahomes for MVP through the first 2 weeks. So he's just playing lights out, and that game really was just wild. Minnesota going back and forth. They put up big point totals as well, and then it comes down at the end of the game, and as always seems to be the case with the Vikings, missed field goal at the end at a play that Mike Zimmer thought was an easy kick, and what was it, 37 yards, something like that, and Minnesota can't close the deal, and you just think time and time again with the Vikings, missed field goals that were very makeable. That one playoff game against Seattle
Oh
when
my
Blair
God! Don't
Walsh
even give
missed
me
from like
nightmares of that again.
20 something yards. So, a strange loss for the Vikings. I have to give them, I don't know if credit is the right word, but they played 2 games on the road. They've lost them both, but they've been in both games. So, I don't know if that bodes well for the rest of the season. We'll see. Kirk Cousins, though, off to a good start.
He's off to a good start. I mean, he's usually always off to a good start if the games are not in prime time, and neither of these games were. I mean, his primetime record is absolutely atrocious. But given the way the Packers started off, they're now 1-1. The other two teams in that division, 1-1, 0-2. Nothing to really, be shaken in your boots about, I think, with the Bears or the Lions. They're still in the thick of this, right? Like, they're not out of the woods. They still get, I would like to think, 2 freebies against the Lions. So, like, there's possibilities for this team. I do see some positives, right? I like to see a little bit more out of that defense. I like to see Justin Jefferson get a little bit more involved inside the passing game. Adam Thielen has been great inside the red zone, not getting really involved inside the 20s, inside the red zones there. I would like to see a little bit more there. But the story, as you highlighted, has to be Greg Joseph, the kicker. I mean, it's not only, Bry, that he misses a makeable kick. I'm not saying it's easy, but he misses a makeable kick at the end of the game. And remember, this is a game where Matt Prater, and we know the cannon leg that he has, the bazooka that he has attached to his body for the Cardinals, he had a 62-yard field goal in this game. So it's not like we didn't see already a difficult kick be made in this game. But to me, you're kicking what? I don't know, a 40-yarder, 42-yard. Like, it wasn't anything insane. And to miss that wide right, to completely pull it wide right, and they're only in that position, Bry, because he also missed an extra point. He missed an extra point earlier in the game. So the game would be tied, and even if you missed that field goal, now we're going to overtime. So Greg Joseph screwed them twice that afternoon, and it feels like the Vikings, the Chargers, these are all teams that just are snake bitten that we're talking about now in our second year of doing this that can just not find a good kicking game. I just don't know what it is.
I don't think there's any answer for it. And just one last point on the Vikings that I think bears watching is Dalvin Cook got a little bit banged up in this game. I know he had a big rushing total over 100 yards, but I think he left this game on a couple different occasions, so his status will be worth monitoring, especially for the many fantasy owners going forward.
Absolutely. He's a tough guy. We've seen him have, the major injury in the past with the ACL, but he's someone that I hope he's all right, because you want to watch a guy like that in the league. He's one of the true bell cows left in this entire NFL, and he's just electrifying when he's on the field. I love him. Transitioning to the Titans again, and we're going to talk about the Titans in a positive mindset this time as opposed to about 30 minutes ago. The Titans went up right to Seattle. They visited the Seattle Seahawks coming off their win against the Colts in week 1. The first time that the 12th man has been in the stands in, 18 months or something like that. And the place was electrifying. You saw the false starts happening for the Titans. They're getting blown out in this game. At one point, it's like 24-9 Seattle. And I go, here we go. Titans falling apart. Can't get any rhythm going. I know how hard it is to play in that place. And then all of a sudden, Bri, the second half kicks in. And the Titans score a touchdown in the third quarter. And Seattle doesn't. And then the Titans score 2 touchdowns in the fourth quarter. And Seattle only walks away with 6 points. And you go, wait a second. Are we tied? Are we going to overtime right now? Did the Titans somehow pull this out and this game is tied? And then you go, well, how did that happen? And you look at the box score if you weren't watching the game and you go, it's the king. It's Derrick Henry having over 200 yards of total offense. I mean, just a crazy game. I mean, did you watch this game? What were you thinking as you saw? Did you see it more as the Seahawks collapsing or the Titans making an incredible comeback?
Yeah, I wasn't following this game too closely because, frankly, I thought it was finished, and I was mostly glued to the Cowboys and Chargers, which was just a terrific game. And then I was at that point getting ready for the Sunday night game. But then I started to see what was going on, and you see the Titans coming back, and it was just wild because that's not an offense that you usually associate with a big comeback. But when you get the big runs that you did with Derrick Henry, and he could just be a one-man wrecking crew at times. I mean, he is just so fun to watch. The stiff arms, he's just a load to bring down and just really become an elite player at that position, which is interesting because at the time he was drafted, there was a lot of questions about how effective he would be at the pro level. Well, there's no questions anymore. He's a franchise running back, and what a win that was for Tennessee in that environment, down the way they were, to rally and win. I think that bodes very well for them going forward.
And I think what helped was, Tannehill, unlike week one, unlike that offense of week one, he took care of the ball. He had a fumble, but it wasn't recovered. There was no turnovers for that entire Titans offense. And riding Derrick Henry to 182 yards, 35 carries. He was getting 5.2 yards on average a clip, Brian. Like, that is fantastic to throw in another 55 yards. And then, hey, there was that new man, Julio Jones, 6 catches, 128 yards. Honestly, as you alluded to earlier, that touchdown that got called back that he had, that was a touchdown, was it not? I mean, that was ridiculous that was called back. You could clearly see that his one foot gets down. I believe it was his left foot, and then the right foot, the toe taps inbounds. Just because the entire heel does not end in the end zone, you only need the toe part to end to get the 2 feet. So I don't know what they were looking at there and how that was not a touchdown. Do you agree with that?
I do. That's perplexing, especially because the NFL replay system seems, out of all the sports, to be by far the best. I mean, very rarely is there a call that after it gets reviewed, you say, really? I think they got that wrong. It seems like they always get it right, but not in this case. It's not like other sports where baseball, we have so many arguments about calls, and basketball with ticky-tack fouls and all this kind of stuff. Football has a great system in place. That was one that just looked like it got missed.
Yeah, it was also week 2 was a rough week for referees. I mean, we're not talking about this game in expansive nature, but in that Chargers-Dallas game, there was some horrific calls in there. So it was a bad week, I think, all around for injuries in the NFL and for officiating, and that came to head as well in that Seattle game, the Titans game there. But the Titans are able to pull it out. They walk off at the walk-off field goal in overtime, quiet that crowd, and I won't say a much-needed win because the AFC South is terrible, but for the Titans to get the taste out of their mouth, starting off the season, what I will say is 2 very difficult games in the Cardinals and the Seahawks, an impressive win, and my hat's off to them. The final game that we should talk about here in week 2 is that Sunday night thriller. Chiefs, Ravens, Baltimore, still once again banged up, injured, going in there, all on Lamar's shoulders, defense banged up, people like Marcus Peters out for the year, the Chiefs leading the entire game, Patrick Mahomes playing out of his mind for the most part, and yet somehow at the end of the game, the Ravens are running for a 4th down to ice the game and walk away with a 1-point lead. I mean, a crazy 4th quarter comeback. I mean, Bri, are you drinking that Lamar Kool-Aid if you weren't already?
Well, as you know, if you go back to our predictions, I had the Ravens winning the division over Cleveland, over Pittsburgh. Neither of us were too high on Pittsburgh, but I picked the Ravens, and then I was a little bit questioning it, not just with the week 1 loss, but just with the amount of injuries this team has sustained so early in the season. I mean, they're already down to like their 4th running back. They're bringing in veteran running backs all over the place. But if there's one team that can sustain this kind of adversity, I feel like it's the Ravens, because they just have that culture that John Harbaugh has put in place, and it's the team that just consistently gets it done. And that is a game on Sunday. It's very rare that they're an underdog at home, but I think rightfully so with Kansas City coming in. That game starts, you get a defensive score from the Chiefs right off the bat on the road, and you think that's going to be really hard to overcome. and it was just a great performance by Lamar Jackson to rally the troops in a game that, as you said, Mahomes put up big numbers. It wasn't so much Tyreek Hill beating them; it was the other receivers that you mentioned earlier, the Byron Pringles and the Demarcus Robinsons who were doing damage. That's just why the Chiefs are so dangerous. You can shut down Tyreek Hill, and there's still so many other guys who can beat you. But the Ravens just kind of chipped away, hung in there, and the decision late, which I think was a no-brainer. There was no way you could punt the ball back to Mahomes.
No.
And John Harbaugh trusted his guy. There was the famous line there where he asked Lamar specifically, "You want to go for it?" He says, "Oh yeah," and they go for it and get it. Ice the game, and that's just a tremendous win for Baltimore.
Yeah, it's a tremendous win. You have Tyrann Mathieu for the Chiefs coming back. You see how much that defense needs him. He's impactful right at the beginning of the game. Gets the pick six, gets another interception later. He's just a guy that is always around the ball. The ball is magnetic to him. I just don't know what it is. Yeah, that impressive, amazing weaving touchdown from Kelsey that I'm sure you've seen on every highlight reel if you're listening to this right now over Twitter or ESPN or somewhere like that. You hold Tyreek Hill to 3 catches for 14 yards. I mean, that cannot be understated how incredibly impressive that is. The Ravens, they turn it over, a couple times there. One ended up being the Mahomes interception earlier, but the big one was at the end of the game there, the fumble by Clyde Edwards-Helaire that set up the Ravens to ice the game when the Chiefs looked like they were driving the field to go in for the game-winning field goal. A heartbreaker, an absolute heartbreaker, and just a great job of that Ravens defense looking for the turnover, staying on their assignments, knowing what to do, piecing it together on the offensive side of the ball in the run game. Lamar over 100 yards. I think he's the first quarterback ever now to have 4 games of going for 100 yards rushing and over 200 yards passing. No one in the NFL history has ever done that. No one ever is probably going to do any of these kind of crazy stats. And filling it in there with Tyson Williams, Latavius Murray, who's just signed. Devontae Freeman had a couple long carries. He's just signed. They're finding a way, along as John Harbaugh and Lamar Jackson are leading this ship, this Ravens team needs to be watched out for no matter what injuries they have.
Yeah, and they still have a lot of firepower offensively. Of course, it starts with Jackson, his ability to run the ball, but Mark Andrews at tight end, just a great red zone target that Lamar clearly has great trust in. And Hollywood Brown, he's the one guy who can really take the top off the defense, and he's had a great start to his season. So I think he's a big-time weapon in that offense. And I think the Ravens are going to be in it for the long haul, even with the injuries. They lost Dobson right off the bat, and then Gus Edwards gets hurt right as the season starts, and you think they're going to have trouble with running backs? Nope, they'll figure it out, and the guys they plugged in have already done the job. I think the Ravens are going to have another pretty good season.
Oh, absolutely, and keep an eye out, final shout out to rookie Patrick Queen out of LSU. That's a player that I wish the Rams traded back into the first round and got. I love that kid, athletic linebacker, led the tackles that night for the Ravens. He's just an incredibly explosive player. Brian, with that being said, we're going to wrap up this show this week as, we're running about in the 55-minute mark here on time. Let's jump over to week 3 picks, Brian. So we're coming off a pretty impressive week 2, pretty solid week 2 after a very disappointing week 1 in terms of our picks. So let's try to get back on track here. Let's start with tomorrow night's game, the Thursday night game. Panthers-Texans. David Mills is starting for the Texans. Jeff Driscoll signed off the practice squad once upon a time. A Florida Gator is backing him up. Tyrod Taylor out here with a hamstring injury. How long is he going to be out? We're not sure. Panthers, quietly, I know they've not played that many impressive teams because I don't know what to make of the Saints, and then they played the Jets, your Jets, in week 1. But they're playing pretty solid right now. And so for me, I'm taking the Panthers to win on the road here and get to 3-0.
I am taking Carolina too. It's interesting because Thursday night is so much tilted toward the home team. It clearly is the distinct advantage playing at home on Thursday night. And Houston is deserving of at least a little bit of props, for a team that we thought was clearly if not the worst, one of the worst teams in the league, and they get a win in week 1, albeit against Jacksonville, and they don't play that terribly last week against Cleveland. I think, though, Carolina, Sam Darnold just looks settled with that offense, looks like a new man in his new spot there in Carolina's got good weapons around him. McCaffrey off to a good start. DJ Moore, Robbie Anderson. I think the Panthers find a way. Pretty close game, but they'll win it on the road.
Yeah, important to note, Carolina 2-9 all time on Thursday night games, but I think they're going to get that third win this week. We'll switch over to the Sunday night games, and we'll start in the 1 o'clock games as we always do. Colts, Titans. We've talked a little bit here about, obviously, the Titans at long length, but we've talked about the division a little bit and how putrid it seems to be. I don't know the status right now of what's going on in Indianapolis. Carson Wentz, he met Aaron Donald this week, Brian. He ended up being a little reckless. Aaron Donald landed on both of his ankles. He somehow, Brian, sprained both ankles at the same exact time. I mean, I feel like Carson Wentz is the only player in the entire league right now that you could hear that story and go, yeah, okay, that makes sense. Like, it just, he's so injury prone and so reckless, and this constantly keeps happening. So with that uncertainty in the air, and, I guess the backups there are going to end up being starting for them. I mean, we saw Jacob Eason at the end of that Rams game was, a kid just thrown into the fire. He was not ready. So is he going to be starting here? And so with all that uncertainty, I got to take the Titans to win this one.
I'm with you on Tennessee. It's a good divisional matchup, but the Colts off to a tough start with those 2 losses. Now the uncertainty surrounding Wentz. If he goes, he's obviously not 100%. I don't really know what to make of Jacob Eason, so I'm going to favor Ryan Tannehill, Derrick Henry coming off that huge game, and the Titans to get back on track after a clunker in their first home game of the year and win this one.
Yeah, they really better not let us down again, otherwise we can't pick any Titan home games for the rest of the year. Falcons go to the Giants, and this is one of those games that I have a feeling I'm not going to be watching a ton of. It's going to be one of those where I look up the highlight video after the game, because these are two really, and I'm only looking up the highlight video for this show because these are two really bad teams. The Falcons so far this year have allowed 40 points a game. That's the most in the NFL. That's putrid. That's just horrific. But the Giants have a tendency as a team to shoot themselves in the foot constantly. So I'm going to be honest here, Brian. I'm going to somehow ride with the Giants because they're the home team.
Wow.
And I think Daniel Jones will make enough plays. I don't feel good about it. I think this game is just going to be really hard to watch.
Yeah, I'm with you as far as the game being hard to watch. I'm just wondering, I don't know if you can recollect this, but going back to last year, was there a single game that you picked the Giants to win?
I don't know if there was. I'll have to look back at that. Maybe one?
That's why, like, when you said the Giants, it was almost like I'd never heard that before on this podcast.
A shock. It was a shock from my house to your house. It went right across the waves.
It really did. It's a game that I just don't know which way to go. I think I'm going to go with Atlanta. I mean, I don't necessarily feel good about it. You wouldn't feel good either way in this game. I mean, it's pretty much a pick-'em game the way both teams are playing. I guess I'll just take Atlanta and hope that their skill position players like Calvin Ridley and the rookie tight end Kyle Pitts can have a big game against a Giant defense that has not played well in the first 2 games. And Atlanta, that week 1 game was kind of eye-opening because we both thought they would handle Philadelphia week 1, and that game was just a complete trouncing by the Eagles on the road. So it just looks like the Falcons, like the Giants, are in for a long season. I'll take Atlanta. What the heck? It's going to be a tough one.
Well, one of my favorite tweets of the week was the Atlanta Falcons and Arthur Smith, head coach there, and they quoted him saying like, there's 15 more games left, 15 more weeks of season, 14 more games left, blah, 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 or 15 more games left. And my funniest part was the Jags were were writing about like, hey, are you copying our homework, basically? And I'm paraphrasing because Urban Meyer said basically the exact same thing as they dropped to 0-2. So it's just, it's parody in the NFL, even in coaching comments. what do you say when you're 0-2 and both of those teams you just haven't played well? There's not much you can really do except go out there and deliver on Sunday.
Yeah.
So we'll go over the Chiefs and Chargers game. Chargers visiting Arrowhead, visiting the Chiefs. Another great marquee matchup here. Very important here for the Chiefs not to drop this game and drop to 1-2 apparently, because while I trust them, that division quickly is looking pretty impressive to start this month of the season here in September. I'm going to trust that the Chargers will not make enough plays and will be the Chargers as they normally are, and I think the Chiefs are going to bounce back here at home and they're going to win this game.
I'm going Kansas City. This game to me feels like a game where the Chargers hang in early. They're in the game at halftime. I think it's close. And then the Chiefs pull away with a couple explosive plays late. That's the way I see it playing out. High scoring game, but Chiefs, too much firepower.
Absolutely. Remember, the Chiefs have dominated this division. They've won 31 of the last 35 games against their division counterparts. The Bengals playing the Steelers. They're going over to Pittsburgh, and the Bengals, they're kind of what I thought they'd be, right? You know, they are who we thought they were, kind of is the quote there, where, you know, they pull out the overtime win there in week 1 against the Vikings, and then I picked them last week, you picked the Bears. I thought they were going to have a better performance there. They were in the game, and then all of a sudden, the announcers, you know, it was the old announcers jinx. Yeah, Burrow hasn't thrown an interception in the last, 199 attempts, throws 3 picks to end the game. 2 in a row. So it was just one of those where, you know, they're running a pick 6 back and it just didn't work out for old Joe Burrow. I will say, and we said this leading in the draft season show that we did, Jamar Chase, he's shaking off the rust there that he had in a very rough preseason. But you know what? The main part of this team needs to be protecting Joe Burrow. He is getting annihilated in the first 2 weeks. I mean, he is getting hit constantly. I don't understand if you're Zach Taylor, the head coach there, or you're the ownership in the Brown family over there. How do you not look at that and go, Jesus, we need to protect our franchise quarterback? And now I understand you're going into Pittsburgh, and that team has seemingly not only a rash of injuries, a rash of groin injuries. It seemed like everyone injured their groin last week. Even Big Ben is banged up with a pectoral injury that he didn't disclose in the post game. But I'm scared of Joe Burrow going against this front seven, injured or not, and I think the Steelers are gonna beat the hell out of him come this Sunday.
Yeah, you mentioned exactly the point I was going to bring up with Cincinnati. You know, you can have all these flashy skill players, and they do. They've got good-looking wide receivers with Chase and with T. Higgins, and can run the ball with Mixon and all these different things on offense. But if you're allowing the young quarterback who had a pretty serious injury last year to consistently take a beating, that's just not going to bode well, especially against a Steeler team that can get after the quarterback. Not sure yet what T.J. Watt's status is because he came out of the last game with an injury. But I'm going with Pittsburgh too. This is a game, you know, where if Cincinnati were to win, that would really lead you to believe the Steelers are taking a big step back. They had a big first game there in Buffalo, getting a win, setback last week against the Raiders. I think they'll get back on track here and take care of Cincinnati.
Again, I didn't think the Steelers, even in Buffalo, were that impressive offensively, and that showed last week against Las Vegas. They were not great there as well. But man, I really pray for Joe Burrow in this game that he could protect himself. A long time ago, earlier this year, I did a mock draft and I put Rashawn Slater over on the Bengals. I said, you should draft this guy. He's having a pretty good 2 weeks, just saying, over there for Los Angeles Chargers. So Cincinnati front office, you want to give me a call, just let me know. The Bears go to the Browns. They're going to Cleveland. And while I haven't been too impressed with Cleveland in the first 2 weeks, particularly last week, where I might have undersold the Texans a little bit, and we'll talk more about that, but I didn't think they were that impressive, particularly in the passing game. But the Bears just announced, Matt Nagy announced, you know, does it have to do with maybe the injury of Andy Dalton, or they're just using that as an excuse? But Justin Fields will make his first NFL start already here in week 3 against the Browns. I don't think he's in for a great performance here and a great matchup. And while I'd rather watch him play than Andy Dalton, I'm taking the Browns to win this one outright.
I'm taking the Browns as well. And yeah, the thing with Fields is I think there's a reason why the coaching staff made the decision they did that coming out of camp, they go with Andy Dalton because they don't think Fields is ready yet. And when he came into the game in relief, the last game, it was a struggle. Now, we know he showed some big time promise during preseason, but you do with that what you will. It's preseason. The real games are a different animal. I think he's going to have some struggles early on in his career here, and the Browns are a team that are ready for big things as we know. So I'm taking Cleveland.
Yeah, absolutely. It's going to be my argument is just if Justin Fields wasn't ready a couple weeks ago, but now he's ready in week 3, I don't agree with that. I think that's more that you promised Andy Dalton to start and you were just afraid to go back in your promise. That's kind of how I see that. The Ravens go over to Detroit, and I don't think this one should not be close. I said that in week 1, San Francisco, Detroit. San Francisco was blowing them out, and then they were just trying to choke away the game there at the end. So for me, I don't think the Ravens, they're going to be too well coached for something like that. They're going to be too disciplined, and I think Lamar is going to run all over this very quickly depleted Detroit team. Remember Jeff Okuna, the corner I really love, out for the year with an Achilles injury. And so I think with that being said, the Ravens are going to run all over Detroit. They're going to win this game.
Yeah, I think the Lions have the most rookies that are playing meaningful snaps of any team in the league. So there's just a lot of inexperience out there. Goff off to a decent start. Doesn't have a lot of great weaponry around him outside the tight end Hawkinson off to a very good start. But the Lions are right there for the taking for the Ravens here. I think Ravens on the road cruise behind Lamar Jackson and win this one easily.
And while I'm rooting for Goff out there, man, he doesn't have a lot of weapons, but he missed some reads last week against the Packers on Monday night. There was guys wide open, and he was forcing the ball into double coverage. So he's got to do a better job as the talent that he has at the amount of years he's been in the league. He's got to read defenses a lot better than that. The Saints go over to the Patriots, and this is another game where I'm like, what are these two teams? You know, the Patriots, they kind of play a mirror image of themselves in week 1, lose a 1-point game to Miami, then come back and, I'm sorry, beat the crap out of your listless Jets, which seems to always happen. So I'm like, I'm wondering really what this team is. And then the Saints, consequently, the same feelings. They come out, smack the Packers, very efficient week 1, lose really bad to the Panthers. Did that have to do with the COVID situation where 8 coaches were out? Or is it something larger there that I should watch out for? So I'm kind of back and forth on what I want to pick here, but I'm going to end up surprising you, and I'm going to pick the Patriots to win this game. I'm going to take the home team. I'm going to take them to be a little bit more buttoned up, and until I see more of what these two teams are, particularly the Saints, I'm going to go with the Patriots.
Yeah, I'm taking the Patriots too. It's hard to go against them when they're at home. I know they lost week 1 only by a point there against Miami last week. Yes, it was against the Jets, but you'd have to say Mac Jones looks pretty good, looks pretty comfortable as a rookie. And when you watch him compared to Zach Wilson, now we know there's no comparison, the system and the coaching and all those things that go into it. But he looks like he knows how to run the offense that Josh McDaniels wants to run. There's not going to be a lot of big explosive plays, but they're going to kind of rely on the defense. They can run the ball effectively. And Mac Jones looks like he's going to play safe, maybe Alex Smith style football, where he doesn't necessarily push the ball downfield, but he limits the mistakes and does enough to manage the game. And I think that'll be good enough for the Patriots.
So wow, I'm surprised we're in agreement on that one. 2 more 1 o'clock games. The Cardinals go to the Jags. I don't think there's a lot to talk about here. I'm not going to waste any time. If the Cardinals lose this game, it'd be a bad look given that they're a race there in the NFC West, so they should easily, comfortably win against the Jags.
Yeah, I agree. And I was concerned about the hire of Urban Meyer for Jacksonville. To me, I didn't like the fit because I don't like when guys become established as college coaches like Nick Saban and they try to venture into the NFL and it just doesn't work out. And I just don't see this working out for Urban Meyer in Jacksonville. And I know it's only been 2 games, but I don't see him being a winner there. I just don't see it. Now, you may feel differently. I know you're a big Urban Meyer guy, having coached your Florida team there in the past, but
That was
it
a
just looks
long
like
time ago.
a rough start in his NFL coaching career.
No, I definitely agree. And then there was those, I don't know if you saw this, there was this weird rumors that were going on that he quickly shot down, but sources close to him were reporting that he might have had some interest there in USC after they fired Clay Helton after 2
Yeah.
games of the season. So that seemed like a marquee job. He seems like he's more comfortable in college. So there was so many crazy rumors flying around. That's why I'm so upset we didn't get to do the show last week, because we would have talked about that, about is he going to leave the Jags high and dry in the middle of the season, at the beginning of the season? But he shot that down. He's at least staying for the year. I wasn't in love with that hire. I just kind of hope that they could figure it out for Trevor Lawrence's sake, to be honest. The final 1 o'clock game is the Washington football team traveling to Buffalo. I think this is going to be a great game, especially with Washington's defensive line, which has not impressed too much. I know they had 4 sacks there against Daniel Jones, but that was really early on in the game. I need to see a little bit more out of that defense. But offensively, I don't know. Can I trust Taylor Heineke week to week? Is he going to be that guy, as it seems he's going to be, at least for the next 6-7 games? So for me, Buffalo going to bounce back from their opening home loss there to Pittsburgh, and they're going to win this game.
Yeah, it's a tough game to figure because I feel like it's contrasting styles going at it. The Bills and their explosive offense, even though they haven't, Josh Allen's not putting up great numbers. The Bills put up a big number on Miami last week in a 35-0 demolishing, but they had the home loss against Pittsburgh. Allen's been kind of pedestrian. We'll see now going against Chase.
Right?
Yeah, right. And now going against Chase Young and company, as you allude to. I could see Washington winning, but I am going to take the Bills, although I think the game will be closer than people expect.
No, I do think that. I need to see. I hope it's a blowout, honestly, for the Bills. I mean, Josh Allen, he's not looked great. Even that 35-0 win last week, that was more about the Dolphins and that Bills defense. He's just not look like the guy that he should be, given all the money that he was awarded. The 4 o'clock games start with the Jets, your Jets, going against the Broncos. It's a game I don't need to talk once again too much about. Bri, I hate to break this to you, but you guys are going 0-3. This is not going to be a win for you guys, and Teddy Bridgewater going to make a little bit of a mini revenge game against you guys, and the Broncos are going to win.
Well, I agree. And the only thing I'll say about the Jets is, the fans have too high expectations as far as
Way
the
too
quarterback goes. And I see that when in his first home game, he goes out there and he's overmatched against the Patriots, which Bill Belichick just eats rookie quarterbacks for all meals of the day, as we know. But when you're a rookie quarterback, you're going to have games like that. And in this area in New York, as we know, living in this area, the fans just expect instant results.
Yeah,
and they think,
we're going to the Super Bowl.
Right. They think, okay, Darnold, it was a high pick. He didn't work out. You threw him out the door. Now we draft the next guy, and he's going to be great. Well, it doesn't work that way. You got to have time to adjust to the new league and the environment around you, and it doesn't happen overnight. So there's clearly is going to be a learning curve with Zach Wilson. Maybe eventually he'll be good, maybe not. We think Robert Saleh is going to do good things eventually as the coach. We think they finally have the right guy. But to me, the booing is what bothered me the most, because I know it was a dreadful performance, but that is part of the reason why the Jets are where they are, because the franchise makes these decisions because everybody's telling them, oh, this guy's no good, we got to get him out, and now we draft another guy second overall, and we expect him to be the savior, and it just doesn't work that way. So, but going to the game on Sunday, look, they're going into Denver. It's a tough place to play. The Broncos have won 2 games on the road already. They're looking really good with their offense, and Teddy Bridgewater, I would expect, unfortunately, Zach Wilson to be overmatched against Von Miller and company. And I don't have very high expectations, as I don't think anybody would.
No, I think it's a good point. I think the thing that has kind of hampered the Jets in the last decade or so is bad front office. The front office has not hired the correct coaches. Let's see Adam Gase over there, and has not hired the correct GMs. Ownership has not put in the correct people in there. But now I like the setup they have. I like Robert Saleh. I like what they have going on in the front office. There can be progress. It's just going to take time to rebuild that team once again. And, also Mekhi Becton's out as well. The Dolphins go to Las Vegas and they play the Raiders. I think this is actually going to be a really good game. However, we did note right before the show that Tua has cracked ribs. He broke his ribs, and he is going to be out for the game. He is not going to be playing at least this week. They don't know going forward how long that's going to be, but he's not going to be playing this week. I believe Brissett is going to end up starting this game. With that being said, and given how listless they looked on offense, especially when Tua left the game, I'm taking Las Vegas to go 3-0.
I'm with you on the Raiders. I might consider Miami if they were at full strength, even though we don't frankly know yet what Tua is. He's had very much up and down results as a starting quarterback, but with Jacoby Brissett in there, Raiders are riding high with the way they played through the first two games. I think that'll continue for another game here at home.
Yes, I agree. 4:25, the Seahawks go to the Vikings. This could be a little bit of a trap game. Minnesota, as we've talked about, has played well, but I think Seattle needs to get that taste out of their mouth after collapsing last week, and I expect them to go on the road into Minnesota, and they're going to win this game.
Yeah, you call it a trap game. I'm going to take the home team here. I think when a team has a couple close losses on the road, and then they get in front of their home fans for the first time in that beautiful stadium that they have there in Minneapolis. I think it's a big performance for the Vikings here. Cousins has gotten off to a good start. He has good weapons around him. The Seattle defense, giving up 30-plus points to Tennessee last week. I think the Vikings are going to win. They are very tough at home typically, and I think they get on the board here with a victory.
Fair enough. That's our first disagreement in a little bit there. The final 4:25 game is the America's, quote-unquote game of the week. It's Tampa Bay Bucks visiting my LA Rams. This game being played in SoFi. I would say, given that the fans, the atmosphere, this is by far, even eclipses the Sunday night game, the biggest game in SoFi Stadium's brief history. This is a huge deal. The defending Super Bowl champs coming in. We're both 2-0. However, I'm going to pick against my Rams here. I did not love that grit. It was a gritty performance, but there was some key mistakes there. There was too many offensive possessions that were just not going in the correct direction. And then to have that miscue on special teams, Nick Scott, what are you doing? I don't know if you saw that, Bri, but that was horrible. Not aligning correctly on the unorthodox alignment as a personal protector for Johnny Hecker, lets the ball hit off of him, and it scoots in for the Colts to scoop it up and pick up an easy touchdown there. Thank God that Matt Stafford was able to go right back in 4 plays and score a touchdown and take back the lead. But if it wasn't for some great defensive stands and some miscues from the Colts inside the 5-yard line, that could be a very different ball game. And what Tampa Bay is doing, Gronk is on fire. I think Antonio Brown is not going to play in this game because he's on the COVID list as that got announced today. But with all that being said, Tom Brady is a monster, and I think he's going to go into L.A. This is going to be a kind of a revenge game given what happened to the Rams going to Tampa and winning last year, and I think the Bucs are going to win this one.
I'll tell you, you run out of words with Brady. At 44 years old to be playing like this, it seems like he's playing as well as he ever has. It's just really makes you wonder how long he can keep going, and makes me want to really retract my statement that I made about the Bucs not winning the division, because I just felt it was inevitable that Brady would slow down at some point. But through the first 2 games, you have to be nothing but impressed with what he's done, and that entire offense is just in sync, and Gronk is a part of things now. They really look unstoppable. Having said all that, it feels like very often you go against your team and then I pick your team. I feel like I've gotten the upper hand most of the time in these cases. But I look at the Rams in their last game, and I'll take the positive spin in that they won a tough game on the road when they weren't at their best. And to me, that is the sign of a good team. I like what I've seen from them. You have to love the way Stafford has played. Cooper Kupp, fantasy owners are smiling all over the place. I'm one of them. What a start he's off to. Just incredible. What a game last week against the Colts. So they've got some good weapons. They're running it effectively with Henderson. I think they're going to win this game, and that's going to be a big-time statement to prove that the Rams mean business this year. year.
Yeah, remember Darrell Henderson, possibly he's questionable for this game. He bruised up some cartilage on his ribs. So I think this could be a little bit of a Sony Michel game. So a little reunion kind of rivalry there between him and Brady back from their 2018 Super Bowl run against the Rams. So that'll be fascinating to kind of watch that play out. And I think it could end up being a high-flying show there. I just hope it's at least way more entertaining than that Super Bowl game. Hopefully it's more like last year and how great that was. The Sunday night game, Packers-Niners. This is a game that, man, on the surface, the Niners have tormented Aaron Rodgers and the Packers.
Yep.
I mean, have just absolutely handled them, abused them. But I'm going to surprise you, Aaron. I'm going to take the Green Bay Packers to win this game.
Wow.
I think I've seen enough of what they did, getting it right in the second half against Detroit, albeit it is the terrible Detroit Lions. But the situation that Kyle Shanahan and the Niners, they're a power running, very mirror image of what the Rams do. They run the ball just like his dad used to run the ball. And they got a rash of running back injuries going on there. Hasty is banged up now. They don't know if Mitchell is going to play in this game. Trey Sermon looks like he's out with a concussion. I mean, I don't know who that, obviously Morster is out for the year with his knee injury. I don't know who the hell is going to be running this ball come Sunday night because they look banged up all over the place. And so given that, and I don't think Garoppolo has been impressive in the slightest through the first two games of the season. I am taking the Green Bay Packers to go on the road into San Fran, exercise some demons, and win this game.
That's interesting because I'm not sure that Rodgers has beaten the 49ers in his career. Every game that I can think of, the 49ers have won. You think of the playoff game, 2 games in the playoffs, the one where Colin Kaepernick ran all over them. And Rodgers, they really have been his kryptonite. But I'm going with the 49ers. I am with you on Garoppolo. I think the quarterback change is going to be coming there sooner than later. Yeah. Trey Lance is going to get his chance. Running back, clearly that's an issue. But the Packers, I think it's still is going to take a little bit of time. They had the disaster that we documented in week 1. I don't think by any means they clicked on full cylinders in the Detroit game. The game looked like a blowout when you look at the score, but the Lions led that game at halftime, and then Rodgers kind of put them away late. So I don't think the Packers are all the way there. I think this is kind of a low-scoring game on Sunday night, but I'm going to take the Niners mostly because of that defense. They really got after the Eagles last week, held them down outside the one big passing play that Jalen Hurts had. But this defense is legit. I think that's going to key them to the victory on Sunday night.
Yeah, it was. I'm still thinking about that pass that he had to Tunyon, however you say it, where he threw it right by the linebacker's ear and scored the go-ahead touchdown. I mean, that pass was insane. I'm still thinking about how the hell he did that.
On the same drive, the bomb to Devontae Adams, a thing of beauty.
It's just amazing. Yeah. It shows you why they put up with him for the offseason. He's just an incredible, one of the greatest talents we're probably ever going to see in our lifetime.
No question.
We'll finish, Bry, with the Monday night game, which is Eagles-Cowboys, which actually is a little bit more interesting here in Week 3 than I thought it would be, albeit these teams are both 1-1. But I've seen some interesting, impressive things out of the Cowboys. I've also seen some typical Cowboys mistakes. And then the Eagles, I don't know what to make of them because part of me goes, are the Falcons just that bad and they handled them in Week 1? And then they look like they're going to beat the Niners, and they have a couple key mistakes there. They get the 90-yard bomb to Watkins, then they walk away with no points. They had the touchdown, then they go for the field goal that gets blocked, so they had that points taken off the board. So I'm not sure what to make of them as well. I will just say that they've been more impressive and better coached than I thought they would be under Nick Sirianni. But for me, what I've seen out of that Dallas defense in particular and what they did to Justin Herbert last week, I think they can do that to Jalen Hurts this week, and I'm going to take the Cowboys on Monday night.
I agree. So we agreed on a lot of picks. By my memory, I think the only ones we disagreed on were Giants, Falcons, and what was the other one recently?
The Packers,
Sunday
Niners.
Yeah, so those were probably the only two. Because I'm with you. You
Well,
look at this game, and
Seahawks, Vikings. We disagree with
oh,
that
that
one.
one too. Okay, so
Yeah,
those are the three. The Cowboys, when you look at these two teams, I think clearly are better talent-wise.
yeah,
But a lot of times with the Cowboys, these are the kind of games that they go out and don't win.
yes,
So I think it's very important for them in the early part of the season. They played well. Remember, they played the Bucks tough, lost a close game there, then won a game on the road against the Chargers where a lot of people didn't think they would get it done. They're running the ball effectively, not necessarily with Ezekiel Elliott. We saw Tony Pollard
yeah.
kind
He's
of take
been way
over and,
better.
yeah, had over 100 yards in the game on Sunday. And we know the weapons that Dak has at his disposal with Cooper and with CD Lamb, and they can really move the football. And Dak looks like he's playing the best football of his. It looks like he's back to where he was before the injury. Let me just say that.
Yes.
So I think the Cowboys are going to win, and I think if they don't, it just proves that it's another year where they're going to underachieve, like typical Cowboys. But if they want to prove that this is a different kind of year for the Cowboys, this is the kind of win, a divisional opponent against the Eagles, that they need to get the job done at home, and I'm going to take them.
I agree. I would like to say that I want Dak to push the ball down the field a little bit more. I'm still wondering by a lot of the passes he's had in the short yardage, 10 yards or under, is that arm issue still bothering him from the offseason. Something to watch going forward here in the season. But guys, that is going to wrap up this week's edition of First and 10, the NFL football podcast here on Clueless Gamers. Brian, I want to thank you so much for joining me. As always, man, it's great to have you. Any final thoughts?
Was really, really a good show. Looking forward to it. Should be another good week of football starting tomorrow with the Thursday night games. So looking forward to doing it all season long.
Yeah, can't wait. Hopefully, we won't have any technical issues or any other stuff. And we'll be back next Wednesday to record these. So we don't want them to be like last season where we have to put 2, 3, 4 weeks in one show. So, guys, there'll be timestamps, as always, down below. I hope you enjoyed the show. If you've listened this far, almost about 90 minutes in, you're greatly appreciated. We both love you. It is awesome. But if you want to skip around, we understand that as well. Like the video, subscribe to the channel, share with your friends if you'd be so kind. And until next week of First and 10, guys, thanks for watching.